I have been writing a sex and relationship, mostly sex at the start, now a lot of relationship advice, column called Savage Love that's been syndicated in the United States and Canada and runs in Italian and Italy and runs in a paper in Hong Kong, which is crazy, for 26 years. My column and my sex advice began before the internet came along and ruined everything. And for the last 10 years, I've been doing a sex and relationship podcast called the Savage Love Cast, which is one of the top podcasts in the world. So I've been listening to people and talking to people about their sex lives and helping them troubleshoot them for 25 years. And the thing that's really ironic about the fact that this became my career is that it started as a joke. 27 years ago, I met a straight guy who was going to start a newspaper, and I told him, oh, you should have an advice column because everybody reads those. You see the Q&A format, and it's about sex or relationships. You can't not read it. And this straight guy looked at me, the gay guy, and said, I want you to write the advice column. That's such great advice. And I wasn't angling for the gig. I'm just a fan of the genre. I just always read advice columns. And we began to joke at this party where we were both pretty drunk about what it would mean for a gay guy to be writing an advice column in a straight newspaper for straight people and giving sex advice to straight people about the icky straight sex that they were having. And that was basically it. At the beginning, it was going to be a joke. I was going to do it for 6 months or a year and then do something else. And I was going to treat in print straight people and straight sex with the same contempt and revulsion that heterosexual advice columnists had traditionally treated gay people and gay sex with. That I was going to go, ew, yuck, gay sex, or straight sex. Why would anyone do that? You must have broken your mother's hearts when you told them you were having straight sex. Now here's some advice, go away. Which is how gay people were treated by the Playboy Advisor, by Ann Landers, by Abigail Van Buren, by all the agony aunts that I read growing up. They would occasionally answer a letter from a homo, but they would handle it with special tongs. And it didn't bother me. I thought it was kind of funny that I grossed out Ann Landers. And so the idea was I was going to make fun of straight sex. And I thought that would take about 6 months for this joke of a column to play out. And something really weird happened in that the mail began to pour in. And instantly other newspapers wanted to pick up this column. And the questions that I started to get were real relationship questions and real sex questions. Because straight people, I guess, kind of enjoyed being treated with this kind of contempt because it was a new and novel experience for them. And my column took off, and 26 years later, I am still doing it. There's one thing that's different now about writing a sex advice column in the internet era as opposed to pre-internet. A lot of the questions 25 years ago were definitions. People would ask me, what's a butt plug? Straight people would, gay people tend to know what that is. And now Buttplug has a wiki page, so you don't have to ask me anymore. Now all the questions I get are situational ethics. This is what happened, I did this, she or he did that, what do we do next, who's right, who's wrong, who's the asshole, who's not the asshole. Of course, two people can both simultaneously be assholes, as my husband and I prove to each other every day. The Q&A format, in which I've been working for 26 years, carves a deep groove in someone. So I'm most comfortable having a dialogue in a Q&A. I have some anonymous questions that people submitted on cards, but I'm going to try to get to just a conversation in a Q&A as quickly as I can. But I want to share with you some of the things that I've learned over the past 25 years digging through people's sex lives and psyches and talking to experts and researchers and scientists and brilliant people like Esther Perel, who you heard from yesterday. And the first and most important thing that I've learned is that we're told a fundamental lie when we're children we're told a lot of lies when we're children about a lot of things. But the most sort of damning and damaging lie that we're told as children about sex is that one day we will grow up and we will have sex. When the reality is that one day we will grow up and sex will have us. Sex is older than we are, stronger than we are, 500 million years old, sexual reproduction. Sex built us through natural selection and random mutation. Sex created us. Sex has its own ideas about why we're here and what it is doing with us. And we pretend we are in charge of sex. We pretend we make all the decisions, and we are not in charge of sex. We human beings, for all of our existence, have been wondering about a higher power and a creator and looking up at the sky when the only creator and higher power that we can be sure exists is one we have to look down to find. And we don't, and we should, because it'll help us respect sex. We have to acknowledge its power as we approach it, because we're negotiating always the terms of our surrender with sexuality and sex and those drives. That doesn't mean that we do anything that we want. It doesn't mean that every sexual impulse should be acted on, but the sex drive has to be channeled. It cannot be dammed up. If you build a dam without spillways, it collapses. If you do the same to the sex drive, if you attempt to dam it up without releases, without a spillway, without channels, it will collapse and wash away everything in your life that you value. But before we get to the Q's and my A's, I want to share 3 sort of big ideas and concepts that I've sort of come to, wrestled with, shaped, and developed with my readers and my listeners over the last 25 years that I find to be kind of grounded in a reality and truthful and very helpful to people when I impart them or give them to them. So these are my gift ideas takeaways from Savage Love over the last quarter of a century. The first and most important one is that there is no the one, that the one is a myth and a lie and a destructive one. The best you're going to do when you're out there is you might find a 0.64, and it's your job to round that motherfucker up to 1. You find someone close and you make them the one, and it is an act of will, and it is a compliment, and it is deceit on some level, but it's mutual, because you know what? You're not their one either. You're their 0.64 too, and they're rounding you the fuck up as well. And you should take that for what it is, which is a gift you're both giving each other. I know you are not the one because I know, because I'm a rational person, that there is no the one. But I am making you the one because everything else that you bring to me, that 0.64, all of that is so valuable that I am going to treat you like you are the one. And stop searching for the mythical the one, because that person doesn't exist. I get letters every day from people who are in loving relationships with people they value, people who make their lives better, people who they have awesome sex with. Not all the sex that they could possibly want in all the different ways they might want it, but a great and rewarding and fulfilling sex life. And they write me every day to say, I'm not sure. Because, this isn't there and that isn't there. What if the one is out there and I'm stuck here with this 0.64? So they ask me for my permission to end this relationship that sounds amazing so they can pursue this myth. And that myth, that's why I call it a destructive myth, because people end relationships because they're full of doubt, because they've heard about this, the one, for so long. They've also heard about the one from parents and friends and coworkers. They've heard about the one from people who know that the person that they're with that they're describing as the one isn't the one. Because people who actually accepted that the one is an act of will lie, will say that they found the one. And what they mean is they rounded that one up. And we should be honest about that that's what we're doing, because it'll help people who may still believe in this destructive myth realize that the one is a creation and a gift. It is a creation, it is someone that you create, and it is a gift you give someone, and they give you the same gift in return. There are 3, and this is the second item, and I'm going to pack 3 into it. And hope I don't go over time. Because I don't like to be spanked, particularly by ladies. No offense, your technique was great. There are 3 things that I toss out of my column a lot, and we talk about a lot. GGG, price of admission, and the 4 magic words. GGG is good, giving, and game. It is what I think we should be for our lovers and what we have a right to expect our lovers to be for us. Good in bed. It takes time and thought to acquire some skills. Nobody can play a violin perfectly the first time they pick it up. A human being with its genitals and its erogenous zones and its nerve endings and its feelings and its erotic imagination is a lot more complicated than a violin, but people have it in their heads that they should be able to play that human being the first time they pick him up in a bar. And that's not true. Good, you've got to be good in bed, you've got to be thoughtful about what you're doing, what you want to do, and you've got to develop those skills, whatever they might be, around the sexual interests or activities that you want to explore with the people who get to be your lover. Giving. Sometimes you give without an expectation of an immediate return. Not everything is going to be 69ing or parallel to it all through your sex life. Sometimes you do for a lover. Sometimes you indulge someone. If you're with someone in a long-term relationship, you sometimes, they're horny, you're not horny, you milk the cow. I've never quite put it that way before, and it's a little screwy on the gender thing, because a milkable cow is a female cow, but this action is kind of male-ish. So I will discard that descriptor for giving. Sometimes you give pleasure without an expectation of an immediate return. And the final one, which kind of relates to giving, is game. Particularly important if you are in or wish to be in a sexually exclusive relationship. You want to be game for anything, ... within reason. That means you want to meet your partner's sexual needs. This is a difficult thing to talk about. It's easier to talk about in gay land. When you begin to talk about it in reference to opposite-sex relationships, which aren't all straight relationships, but for shorthand we will call them straight relationships, when you talk about it with straight relationships, it comes muddied and complicated by thousands of years of sexist indoctrination of men and women being socialized and terrorized to meet the needs of men, defer to men, set aside their own wants and desires in the face of a man's wants and desires. Recognizing that and setting that not aside, but setting that beside game, you want to be game for anything within reason. Sometimes, I say to people, and this can be very controversial, it's damaging for people to hear you should never do anything in bed that you don't want to do. Because imagine a Venn diagram. You have a couple, and it's a Venn diagram, and it's their sexual interests and desires. And there's only 20% overlap in this Venn diagram. So you have two people who are up to 80% sexually unfulfilled and unsatisfied in this relationship. Because if they only do what both of them want to do, they're only doing that 20% overlap. So how do you make that couple more sexually fulfilled, more sexually content, happier? You do what you can as a sex advice columnist to push those circles together. That doesn't mean either person should do anything that traumatizes them, that leaves them curled up in the fetal position on the bathroom floor after it's over, sobbing, that makes them feel insecure, that humiliates them in a way they don't enjoy. Some people enjoy erotic humiliation. You shouldn't do anything that is traumatizing, triggering, upsetting. But when people hear over and over and over again, never do anything in bed that you don't want to do, that results in the end, in many people, not doing something in bed that their partner would like to do, that they are indifferent to, that they could take or leave. And that's a problem. And a problem for a lot of the people who write me is that they're with people who won't go there for them, who won't do for them, because they believe they are somehow being diminished or degraded if they do anything in bed that they themselves don't want to do. And all I ask people who are not doing those things is to sit with that for a second, to think about it, to interrogate it. Because sometimes you're not doing that thing not because it's upsetting or traumatizing, just because it is a take it or leave it. And what the sex researchers like Amy Muse at Toronto University have discovered is that people who people who are game for their partners, who will do something that they wouldn't want to do or initiate with another partner, but that their partner wants to do, they report higher levels of relationship satisfaction. Not the person being indulged, who also reports higher levels of relationship satisfaction, but the person doing the indulging, the person performing, giving this pleasure to their lover, they themselves report higher levels of relationship satisfaction, better sexual connections when they're doing what? When they're doing something that they did not want to do in bed. That is why I think people should be game for anything within reason. One of the examples from my column that I always like to cite is years ago, I got a letter from a college student who was waiting tables and bartending to put herself through school. And she would come home to help put herself through school, also with loans in America. And she would come home at the end of a long shift, and her boyfriend would massage her feet for a mysteriously long time. And then one day he confessed to her that he had a foot fetish, and she broke up with him because she didn't want to be with a pervert. And she was angry, in the letter that she wrote to me, that this thing that she had believed to be this giving and selfless act was, on some level, a selfish act. That it wasn't just about being kind to her and indulging her, it was also about him indulging himself. And men often have a hard time sharing their kinks, 100 to 1. Paraphilias, kinks, men, typically, that's the old stat. Men are, for every 100 people who have a kink, who have a paraphilia, 99 of them are going to be men. That stat now, I think, has been torn down a little bit by the 50 Shades of Grey phenomenon. We know that women are also kinky. Women are less entitled often to act on their desires, to own them until often later in life, when women begin to really own their sexualities in a way that young women often have a block or a problem with. And I've lost my place because I smoke a lot of pot. Oh, the foot fetish girl. I'm from Washington State. Pot's legal there. What can I say? She broke up with her boyfriend and wanted me to endorse that breaking up. And her question to me was, where do I meet a guy who isn't a weird pervert? And I told her I had no idea, but if she ever found out, she should let me know, because I'm occasionally asked that question. I also told her that if you break up with the honest foot fetishist, in the end, because karma, you will marry the dishonest necrophiliac. A foot fetish, I think, falls under game for anything within reason. He enjoys touching your feet. He enjoys licking your feet. If having your feet slobbered all over every once in a while, if indulging him, if saying, tonight it's going to be a foot night, doesn't make you feel awful, if you didn't grow up and get sent to a boarding school where all punishment was administered to feet, I think that's something that you should do. I think that's a place that you should go for them, for the relationship, for everything else. And then you have a right to expect that you will be similarly indulged and pleasured and taken care of. That game is a two-way street, not a one-way street. And so that woman who broke up with that guy, I think, was fucking crazy. Because if you meet a good and loving and tender and smart, challenging person who has a mild, indulgible kink like that, and you break up with that person over that kink, you're fucking crazy. And one of the reasons you're fucking crazy, they just did a paraphilia. I already used that word. Paraphilia literally means non-normative sexual desire, or is defined as non-normative sexual desire. They have just done this big study out of the UK where they wanted to assess and measure the ubiquity of paraphilias. How common are paraphilias, these non-normative sexual desires? And what they found was that a majority of humans, way over 50%, are paraphiliacs, have non-normative sexual desires. So it is not non-normative to have a paraphilia. It's actually normative to have a paraphilia. What we know now, the study of human sexuality is only about 80 years old. And what we know now about human sexuality is that deviance is the norm. And we have to embrace that in our sex lives and in the way we practice love and showing love to one another. Particularly important in sexually exclusive relationships. If you're with someone and they have a foot fetish, if you're dating, and if your wife after 20 years of marriage gets her hands on 50 Shades of Grey or sees the terrible movies and is suddenly inspired by this, bust out the feet, bust out the rope, make it happen. You want your long-term partner to look at you and see the reason they get to, not the reason they can't. Unless it's something fucking crazy, hence the ... within reason. Wants to lick your feet? Okay. Wants to shit in your mouth? No. Sorry to use such an extreme example right before lunch, but I think it's the best illustration of the point. The internet exists in part to skim I want to call it the cream, but some people might describe, no, to skim off the top of the dating pond, the necrophiliacs and the corpophiliacs, and the people into really hardcore crazy kinks. The internet exists in part to help those people find each other and make a dating scene that's viable for the furries. Wants you to wear a fursuit for 6 hours and sweat to death? Maybe not within reason, right? But the internet exists to help furries find each other, and so that they have a dating scene now that works. Same for, I'm not equating furrydom with corpophilia. If there are any furries here, you're going to yell at me after for that. And corpophilia means shit play. Sorry, I already mentioned it. So yeah, nothing within reason. That's not within reason. You shouldn't do those things. That's GGG in a disgusting nutshell. And the last thing, and this ties to, well, not the last thing of this three-part things I've learned second section. The last thing that, and it's something that as a gay person, I quickly got a sense of writing the sex advice column and relationship advice column for straight people. There are some different dynamics in gay land. Some of them are emotional, some of them are about a sort of a single gendered universe, but some of them are mechanical. And a lot of people, and I think a lot of straight people intuit this, and I think it's true. It's why so many straight people who have gay friends will go to their gay friends for sex advice. Even if their gay friends aren't me, they will go to their gay friends for sex advice, because I think a lot of straight people kind of have this feeling that gay people know more about sex, have more sex, and are better at it than straight people are. And I'm here to tell you that that is true. And it is not because we are magic. We are that also, but that has nothing to do with this. We're not magic. The reason we know more, are better at it, and have more, which is a double-edged sword in gay land, but the reason we know more and are better at it is because we communicate. And that's just an obvious point. That's what everybody here is partly telling everybody to do. Communicate, communicate, communicate with your lovers, your long-term partners, with your spouses. Communicate. And here's the thing about the gay experience that makes that so much easier. You can't be gay unless you've opened your mouth and communicated a very difficult truth about yourself and your sexuality and your desires, not even to your lovers. When I was 15 or 16 years old, I had to go tell my Catholic parents that I put dicks in my mouth. That was not something they wanted to hear. But I couldn't be who I was, and I couldn't be also an honest, ethical person, which was also part of who I was, not just a gay person, and be truthful with my family and my parents, and be open about my relationships if I didn't go tell my mother that I sucked cock. Which sounds gross, but ask anybody who's ever had to come out to their parents as a teenager, that's what flashes across their face when you tell them. Mental images of dicks going into your mouth. Before the word gay can be all the way out, an imaginary cock that your mother is putting in your mouth is in your mouth. That's hard. Telling your mother you put dicks in your mouth is hard, is difficult. Telling your boyfriend anything after that is easy. So we are not afraid in gay land of articulating our desires, our wants. We didn't tell our mother this thing that broke her heart so that we could then be afraid to tell our boyfriend what we want. But it goes beyond that. And this is central to a problem with heterosexual sex, as much as I admire it, and I've been toiling in the vineyards of heterosexual sex for 25 years. When straight people get to yes, when straight people get to consent, typically, when you make generalizations about billions of people, there will be tens of millions, hundreds of millions of exceptions. The odds that exceptions are here in the room, I think, are higher than if we just randomly grabbed 800 people off the street. But typically, when straight people get to yes, two straight people for the first time are going to bed, a man and a woman, they get to consent, they get to yes, and they stop communicating. Because everything after that is a given. It's the default setting of vaginal intercourse. They've agreed to have straight sex. It's PIV, penis and vagina. PIV, as we call it in the trades. And so what else is there to talk about? Maybe there'll be some rolling around and kissing, maybe some oral tossed out as foreplay, but these two people have agreed to have sex, this man, this woman. Vaginal intercourse. Nothing left to discuss. And all too often, and tragically, no more discussion. Two guys go to bed for the first time. Two gay guys get to yes, they get to consent. And it is the beginning of a whole other conversation. What the fuck is gonna happen now? Nothing can be assumed. They have to negotiate what happens next. And if there's anything that straight land should steal from gay land, the way we've stolen marriage from you, and a quick aside, we didn't redefine marriage, you motherfuckers did. You redefined it in such a way that you could no longer make a logical case to exclude same-sex couples from the institution as you define and practice it. Used to be gendered, used to be about property, used to be about gendered slavery. And now, in the West, it is the legal union of two autonomous and equal individuals, and they get to decide for themselves what their marriage is. It's not gendered. You can gender it as an option. You can be a Southern Baptist, and the wife can submit joyfully to the husband, but that's a choice. You can be in a femdom relationship, and the husband can submit erotically to the wife, and it's still a marriage. Anyway, where was I going with this? Oh, we stole marriage from you. Here's what we're going to give you guys in return. Here's what you should take from us. I call it the 4 magic words. It begins every gay sex encounter. Whether it's the first time 2 guys who are dating are going to do it, and they waited 6 months, or it's the first time 2 guys who just met on Grindr are going to do it, and they just hooked up. The 4 magic words. It starts every gay male sexual encounter. What are you into? What do you want to do? And implicit, what don't you want to do? And at that moment, you're both mutually empowered to rule anything in, anything out. And often, and this blows some straight people's minds, young straight people, I write to a lot of college students, I speak to a lot of college students, often what one gay guy will say when the other asks, what are you into, is, I'm not into anal. Imagine a man and a woman going to bed, and the man saying, what are you into? And the woman saying, not into vaginal. The guy would be like, you just said you wanted to have sex. Yeah, but I don't want to get fucked right now. How about I fuck your ass for a change? Right? Because a gay guy can say, I'm not into anal, or I don't like to be penetrated. I don't want to have anal at all. 25% of gay men never have anal intercourse. And so what happens after not into anal? Mutual masturbation, oral sex, rolling around, fantasy play, BDSM, whatever else they're into, they begin to toss those things out. They have a negotiation about what they want to do. Young straight guys ask me a lot how they can get women to be more like gay men. Why there isn't a Grindr with girls on it who want to just come over and do whatever. Why there isn't, they look at gay bathhouses. And they wonder why there's no straight equivalent. And there is. It's a whorehouse. A bathhouse is a whorehouse staffed by volunteers. And there's no parallel. There's no parallel in straight land for 2 huge reasons. The first huge reason is violence. Why aren't women as willing to be as sexually impulsive as men? Intimate partner violence, rape, sexual violence, unplanned pregnancy. The risk of pregnancy is one way. Sexually transmitted infections, likelier to go from male to female than female to male. Slut shaming, which is not just something men do to women, but also something women do to each other, falls exclusively on the shoulders of women. The social and physical costs and risks of impulsive sex, of anonymous sex, so much higher for women. You want women to feel freer to act more like gay men, which again is a double-edged sword. Make the world safer for women. And the other impediment, besides violence, is the lack of what are you into, the lack of that question. I'm always telling college-age straight guys, much to the consternation of the administrators who bring me to colleges to talk, if every time you said yes to sex, your ass got fucked, you wouldn't say yes as often as you might otherwise. If every time you said yes to sex, if every time you consented, there was another conversation that you were going to have about what you wanted to do that night, and you could rule penetration out. Maybe because you never like to be penetrated, maybe because tonight you don't want to be penetrated, so you have to get up early tomorrow and you don't want to be the person who got fucked and then lays there having tingle hole for a half an hour after the other person went to sleep or left. Ladies, I know how it is. And the guy who fucked you is fast asleep, which isn't just evidence that he's a cad. Men release prolactin, it's a hormone that literally makes their erections go away, makes them completely disinterested, even disgusted by sex, and makes them sleepy. We used to regard men like rolling over and falling asleep as a character flaw. It's a feature, not a bug. It's how men were designed. So, it's also some evidence that we have that the biological evolutionary theorists believe points to that we are fundamentally non-monogamous species. That and copulatory vocalization together. Why are women so loud when they have sex? Why do women scream and howl often when they have sex and not so much men? Well, 100,000 years ago, 50,000 years ago, a woman of whatever species predated ours, our shared ancestor with other primates, having sex and howling as she's having sex with a male of the species, and all the other males for miles around can hear that. And by the time they get to where the howling's coming from, the guy she was just fucking is fast asleep on the ground. But if women were asked by men, or able to ask also of men, what are you into? And like gay people could rule anything in, anything out, including ruling out vaginal intercourse, including ruling out penetration, straight people and straight couples, even long-term straight couples, would have a lot more sex than they do. If you broaden your definition of sex to include non-penetrative sex play, and you don't treat those things like tragic consolation prizes that you're being given in place of the trophy you hoped for, you will have a better sex. It's magic. Define more things as sex, be happy to have that kind of sex, and you will have more sex. That's what happens in gay land. We give it to you in exchange for marital rights. Monogamy. It's a nice idea. But it is literally the only thing humans do where 100% perfection, perfect execution, is the only standard of success. If you are the world's greatest snowboarder and you are covered in gold medals, you can get on a mountain and snowboard down it and fall on your ass and get up and still be the world's greatest snowboarder. If you are the world's greatest chef, you can burn a fucking omelet one day and still be the world's greatest chef. If you are with someone for 50 or 60 years and you cheated on them one time, you are terrible at monogamy. It's an impossible standard of perfection, and it's why we all fail at it. Those who attempt it almost all fail at it. The stats around infidelity, stats around cheating, are a little fuzzy because, oddly, when you get people on the phone and ask them if they've ever cheated on the spouse who might be sitting next to them, they don't say yes every time. But roughly, the estimates, and these are rough figures, historically, when they first began asking these questions in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 60-ish% of men, 60, 65% of men, 35, 40% of women in long-term committed relationships cheat. All those men and women not married to each other. So the odds that any one relationship, long-term relationship, that there will be an infidelity, pretty fucking high. The stats now, people used to look at that stat, 65%, 60% of men, 35, 40% of women, and go, women are so much better than men. Women are the guardians of the monogamous ideal. Women are naturally pair-bonding, naturally monogamous. Now you look at the stats for people under 40, men and women under 40, and we have achieved parity. Not on pay yet, but on this. 50%, men and women cheating now, under 40. And what does that tell us? That tells us that in the 60s and 70s, for a man to get caught cheating was a lot less risky than for a woman to get caught cheating. The economic consequences of divorce and also slut-shaming were much higher for her. Now that more women earn their own money, have their own jobs, have their own careers, have social networks that aren't all filtered through their husband or their husband's workplace. So that difference in the infidelity stat was always about power and never about virtue. And it's roughly evened out. And again, still, the 50% of men, 50% of women under 40 who've already cheated and have the rest of middle age to top up, not all married to each other. So the odds that two people in a monogamous relationship, in a monogamous committed marriage, that marriage will be touched by the infidelity angel at some point are really, really fucking high. And we tell people, and people believe, that if someone touches someone else, someone who's committed to you, made a monogamous commitment to you, touches someone else with their genitals, even once, they didn't love you. They never loved you. That your entire relationship was a lie, and the only corrective is divorce. You must leave that person. We define it as an unforgivable betrayal, and then we experience it as an unforgivable betrayal. And we sit around with our thumbs in our asses wondering why the divorce rate is as high as it is. When what we should be telling people is that you will grow up, you will fall in love, perhaps if monogamy is right for you or what you think you want, and a lot of people think they want it and actually don't, you will make a monogamous commitment, and asterisk, that doesn't mean because you're in love you're not going to want to fuck other people. You're still going to want to fuck other people, so is your spouse. What monogamy means is you will refrain from fucking other people. Hopefully. And if you make it through 50 years and they cheated once or twice and you cheated once or twice, you were good at you get a monogamy gold medal like the snowboarder who fell down that day. You should have a monogamy gold medal around your neck, not a noose around your neck. If we regarded monogamy the way we regarded sobriety, we talk about monogamy as if it were some other kind of virginity. You're a virgin until you fuck someone or get fucked by someone, and you've lost your hymen, whether it's literal or spiritual, popped, gone, you're no longer a virgin. We should talk about it the way we talk about sobriety. You're sober, but you can fall off the wagon and you can get back the fuck on the wagon. You can sober the fuck back up. And if we talked about it that way, we would be saying to people, value the relationship more than the perfect execution of the ideal. I've been with my husband for 23-ish, 4-ish years, I can't remember. It's been a long time. And for 18 of the last years, we have been non-monogamous. I have had conversations with people in monogamous who are appalled by the fact that we're public about it, that I've talked about it, the fact that we're parents and we've talked about it publicly. And this is how these conversations have gone. I've had people look at me and say to me, I could never do what you and Terry have done because I value commitment and loyalty too highly. And I look at them like, I don't say anything, but I'm thinking, you don't think I want what? And the next thing out of the motherfucker's mouth is, all 3 of my marriages have been monogamous. And I'm like, oh, what you're committed to and loyal to is monogamy. Not these assholes you keep marrying and divorcing, but monogamy. We are committed and loyal to monogamy to such an extent that we are not committed and disloyal to the people we've married. And that is crazy. That is cart before the horse shit. And we need to correct that. That doesn't mean everyone should be in an open relationship like we are. That doesn't mean everyone has to be polyamorous or non-monogamous or monogamish. That means everyone needs to have realistic expectations, and that monogamous relationships are likelier to survive the long haul, including the near inevitable infidelity, if we talk about it this way instead. I am not talking about it this way to talk anybody out of making or staying in the making a monogamous commitment or staying in the monogamous relationship that you are in now, if that is what you want. I am trying, when I talk to monogamous people, to troubleshoot the likely coming catastrophe. There's a British writer whose name escapes me because pot, who said that every monogamous relationship is a disaster waiting to happen. But it's only a disaster waiting to happen, I would point out, if we continue to talk about monogamy and continue to talk about infidelity as always and everywhere a relationship extinction level event, because then we will perform that when it comes. Now, there are degrees, and we have to judge, I think, infidelities not by, it's an infidelity, to the electric chair. We have to judge an infidelity on its own demerits. Fucked your sister on your wedding night? Probably can't get past that. Nor do I blame you. Probably divorce. I might advise that. I've advised people who've been cheated on in certain circumstances to pull the plug or slit the throat, depending. But together 20 years, 25 years, children, family, property, 2 extended families knit together, a history together, a home that you've both inhabited and you've both built out where you feel comfortable and relaxed and safe. Let's put all that on the scale on this side, right? All of that, children, family, property, history, extended families, social status, position in the community, all on one side of the scale. Hand job from a masseuse on a business trip. Or your wife hired a personal trainer that she was really attracted to. Of course she did. No one's ever hired a personal trainer they did not want to fuck. And they messed around. They hooked up. So what the people who say that I place too much emphasis and importance on sex, what those people tell me is this hand job or this hookup with the personal trainer is weightier than all of this. That all of this has to be discarded. That this is so colossally heavy that when you toss it on the scales, this might as well be a feather, and this has to be blown away and thrown away. And I am the non-monogamous person saying to that monogamous couple, don't believe the hype. That you can look at those scales and you can say all of this weighs more. All these years together, children, family, status, position, extended families. That you can add more weight to that. You can allow that to have the weight that it ought to have and say, this we can forgive and get past. This isn't, fucked my sister on my wedding night, and I found out 3 weeks later, or fucked one of the groomsmen on the wedding night because you were the passed out groom. So all I'm advocating for is not openness, not non-monogamy. It's not right for everybody. Non-monogamous people don't go to monogamous people and say, you're doing it wrong. That's a one-way critique. I have monogamous people coming to me all the time saying, you're doing it wrong. I don't say that to monogamous people. I'm telling this to monogamous people because I want their monogamous relationships to survive. I want them to be able to recommit to monogamy if there's an infidelity and an adultery. Because on some basic fundamental level, I'm kind of conservative. I want to protect and conserve marriages and commitments from these storms that are coming into them. I want people to be able to batten down the emotional hatches so that when this happens, and it is likely to, and that is the way you should talk about it before you get married. Not, this can never happen, I would kill you. But when this happens, how will we respond? When this happens, we will remember everything else on this one side of the scales and allow it to have the weight that it should have, and we will work through this, we will forgive if we can. If it is forgivable, if it isn't my sister on my wedding night.